Good morning, everyone. It's Miss Devine. I just wanted to do an introduction today of how to use the graphing calculator. So remember, on your screen, down in the left-hand corner of your Chromebook, you should see a little circle. And if you click that and you type in TI, okay, the letters T and I, yours should come up with a calculator. And it might not say Smart View like mine, but it should say TI. And I think it says 84. And that will then come up anytime you go to search TI, that calculator will always come up. So it will look something like this. I think yours is black on your screen, but it has the same functions, okay? So what I want to do is just go over some of the main buttons on here with you today. Just a few minutes, and then I'll have you try a few things on your own to get us ready to use this. So obviously, some of you may have had the use of a graphing calculator in the past, or maybe you own one yourself, which is great. You can use that on your own. If we were in the classroom, I do have a class set that we could use that I would sign one out to you every class period to use, and then you would return it. But with the virus, we're not supposed to kind of give out materials like that each day. So I need to show you how to use this online one, okay? So I made sure that this was on all of your computers to start the school year. So in your on your calculator here, all of us have this on button to turn it off. You hit second, okay, and that will turn it off. So some of the first few things that I want to go through on here are some of the main buttons. Enter is your equal sign. Anytime that you are plugging in a negative number, so let's say you wanted to plug in -2, okay? Your calculator gets super mad if you use the wrong one. So anytime in your head that you're saying negative, okay, you need to use this little baby negative down here. Anytime in your head that you're saying minus, that is when you use the minus button. So when I read this out loud, it's -2. Oops, let me clear that out. -2 minus 4. Enter. Okay, if you input it incorrectly, it will kind of yell at you, okay, and tell you that there's an error. So some things on here that I want to go through. You should see on the left-hand side here, we will get to a lot of these functions, but there is a square button here, which is going to be useful for us. It's just a quick square that you can input. So if I wanted to do 4 squared, it just inputs that easily. There is also this little caret button over here that we use for powers. So if I wanted to do 4 squared that way, I can do it that way as well. Okay, you should see if you hit the second button, it's kind of like a shift button, and go to this square root. Okay, we type in a number there. Sometimes it has you fill in the parentheses or not. Then it will simplify that for you. All right, so you see all of those buttons. The main thing I want to talk about is we've been doing a lot of functions that have x's in them. Specifically, they have x squareds and things like that. So if you look on your calculator here, in green, they have all different letters. We don't use that, though, when we're talking about the variable x. If I'm using x somewhere, okay, we're always going to use this button, which is xt theta. That's a theta, which is in angle measurement n, okay? So just remember that when you are plugging in an x, that we need to use the button that's next to alpha there, okay? And that will input our x whenever we need it, all right? So if you've used this graphing calculator before, some of the main buttons on the very top are the most important ones. If you click y equals, yours may be in color. If not, it's fine. But you get a list of y equals, okay? This would be if we wanted to put, 2 and 3 functions in here at once and compare them. But all we're going to stick to here is we're going to stick to just plotting one function at a time. Okay, so let's say in y1, which is the first one up there, it says equals. Say that I wanted to see what x squared plus 4x plus 3 looks like. Okay, we know that that's a quadratic. We know some information about it already, right? Concave up, normal. So if I want to plug that in, I would need to use this x button. X, and then I can do squared. So I can either use the caret and then 2, or I use this little shortcut that puts the little 2 there right away. Plus 4, use the little x again, plus 3. So once you have something inputted in y equals, there's no save button. It's in there. All you would do now is go to graph. And your typical graph, okay, is a 10 by 10, just like we've been working with in class. All right. So what I'd like to look at today is I want to look at, you see your parabola here, you see your 10 by 10, which is excellent. What I want to look at today is I want to see, how can we find these two little x-intercepts? How do we find those? So I don't want you to do anything where you're, trying to take your cursor here and moving left and right. That's not very accurate. Okay, we want to find those definite points. That's something we're going to do today. Okay. What if I wanted to find the y-intercept? What if I wanted to find that exact point there? All right. So there's a few different things we're going to get into with this next week. But the main part is I want to take a look at a really important function on this calculator. On the very top here, this top row, there's a trace button. But more specifically, on top of that trace button is something called calc. Okay. So if we go to second trace, that'll bring us into that calc menu. Okay, so second trace. Now this is probably the most important menu that we have here. Okay, and we're going to use the top 5 of these on next time we meet, so Tuesday. So what I do want to look through here is the first 2, which is value. Okay, and the second one there is 0. So here's what value means. When you use this value menu, it says, hey, do you know an x? Okay, if you plug in an x in here, it will tell you the y coordinate that goes with it. Okay, so I know we spent a lot of time doing these by hand. I know, I'm sorry. Where you could find any x and tell me what y goes with it. So for example, if I pick number 1, what happens is you will see an x equals, and then your cursor is blinking. So I have my function graphed there, and it's basically saying, what x do you want to plug in there? Well, if I want to find the y-intercept, that is when x is equal to 0. So let's try that. We plug in 0 and we hit enter. So that means that the point 0, 3 is my y-intercept. Okay, and it is blinking there. Sometimes this is a decimal. If it is, you round it, let's say to 3 decimal places. So then, what if I wanted to find the value of, I wanted to plug in x equals 4, and I wanted to see what the y coordinate is for that. So 4 comma something. Well, I can use this nice little shortcut on my calculator, go to second trace again, go to number 1, which is value, and it's blinking again. So if x is 4, we're going to type in 4, and what's y? 35. So that's really high up there, okay? So, and it's not even on our 10 by 10, so that's okay. It will still calculate it for you, all right? So anytime I ask you to find the value of, if I give you an x and I say, what's the value of y, that's the function you're using, okay? All right, how about the next one? The next function I want to look at in there is the second one, which is 0, okay? So, you know what? I'm actually going to skip that one, I think, for now. I might do that one next week, all right? let's do the minimum and maximum. So sorry about that. We're going to do number 3 and number 4. Okay, so before I tell you what those two mean, when you're talking about a parabola, okay, it's either concave up or concave down. There's no other options. Okay, so concave up and concave down. Now, what these two functions do, number 3 and number 4, is they will actually tell us our vertex, without us doing negative b over 2a and all that shenanigans, all right? But we have to remember, based on what our function is, we have to make sure we pick the right one. So if we pick the concave up, if our parabola is concave up, that means we need to use the minimum function, right? Because our vertex is a min. And if it's concave down, then that means we need to pick max. Okay? So the function that's on my screen right now that I graphed is concave up, right? Let me go back to it. Okay, there's our graph. So I'm going to be picking min. I want to figure out what this minimum is. I go back to that menu, it's always second trace. And I'm going to go to number 3, okay? When you do that, okay, and this is the last thing I'm showing you today, instead of it giving you values down here, okay, what it does is it's going to ask you a few questions, all right? So the most important thing is start moving your cursor left and right so that we can see where it is. There it is. So I moved it left. I see it, okay? And it tells you kind of where it is on your function. So if it's way up high, you know you need to move it down and so forth, okay? So here's what we need to do. I need to find this minimum value. So it's going to ask me 3 questions in a second, okay? The first question it's going to ask is left bound, and then it's going to ask me right bound, and then it's going to ask me guess. Okay, what that means is this. It needs to get really close to that vertex and kind of surround it. Okay, I know where that vertex is. It's right there. So it's first going to ask us left bound, which means go as close as you can to that vertex. Okay, go as close as you can. You need to be to the left of it. Okay, so I usually tell kids, put your cursor on the vertex and hit your left button a few times. Doesn't matter how many. And then hit enter. Okay, we're kind of narrowing in on it. So the next question down here says right bound, which means to move to the right of that vertex. Okay, so move to the right of that vertex, doesn't matter how far, as long as you're to the right, and hit enter. You see these little arrows up here? That means we're somewhere in there. It's narrowing in on it. The last question will always say guess, and guess what? We don't care about that. We always just hit enter. Okay, what will then pop up is what your minimum is in this case, which is -2, -1. That is my exact vertex. Okay, so let's try one more where it's a maximum. Okay, so I'm just going to change my page here. Let's use the function y equals negative, and I'm going to put one that's in vertex form here. Okay, there's our function. So the first thing we do is we go to y equals. To clear this out, we just hit clear. Now I need to type this in exactly how it is. Remember, whenever you say negative in your head, that means that little baby negative. Okay, parentheses, type it in exactly as it is. This is the x you use, -4, and your parentheses. Use the little square right there, +5. Okay, now we're going to hit graph. There it is. Okay, I see it. So the first thing that I want us to do is I want to find the y-intercept. Okay, Now the y-intercept, remember, is when x is 0. To do that, we go to second trace. It's always in this calc menu. And we're going to go to number 1, which is value. Okay, and every time we go to value, it will have a blinking X. All right, so if it's a blinking X, then that means we can plug in any value in there. So I'm going to plug in X is 0. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. So my y-intercept, if you see there, I don't know why that text is coming up, is negative 11. So that means my y-intercept is down here at negative 11. So 0, negative 11 is my y-intercept. What if I asked you to plug in the following values for x, just to see what they are? What if I said, what's the value of y when x is 2? What's the value of y when x is 5? You're just using this value button. Okay, you go to second trace, value, 2, enter. 2, 1 is a point on my graph. It's so much easier than plugging it into your function every time. Okay, but if I taught you this first, then you would never want to do this. Okay, now let's plug in 5, 5, 4. Okay, so these are some other points that would be on there. The only other thing I would like to do is I would like to find the vertex of this. So to find the vertex, we're going to go into the same menu and we're going to decide whether we're using number 3 and number 4, minimum or maximum. This is concave down. So if this is concave down, my vertex is a maximum. Okay, so I'm going to go to number 4. Okay, so I'm going to go to number 4. And remember, it's going to ask you 3 questions. It's going to say left bound, right bound, guess. So I'm going to move as close as I can to this vertex. Okay, and the first question at the bottom left says left bound. So that means I take my left cursor, okay, my left button, and hit it a few times. I'm to the left of that vertex up there. Enter. Right bound, go to the right of that vertex. Doesn't matter how far. Enter. Now it's narrowing in on that vertex. Guess, you always just hit enter. There is my maximum. Okay. Now 3.993, we're going to round that up to 4, 5. That is my vertex without doing any real calculating there. Okay, so you should be able to, at this point, looking at and plugging in a graph into y equals, using the graph button to see it, okay, using this menu on second trace just to use number 1, number 3, and number 4, okay? Thank you. I hope you guys have a good day.